Hi, I'm actor Ian Champion, and welcome to History of Horror Cinema, my personal podcast tour of the good, bad, and the ugly of horror movie history. If you like what you hear, please don't forget to hit subscribe. The Student of Prague, 1913. This spooky 1913 story was billed intriguingly as a four-act romantic drama, heavy in atmosphere, and a showcase for the typically committed, high-voltage dual performance by Paul Wegener some years before the Golem made his name internationally in the Expressionist era. In his book From Caligari to Hitler, Siegfried Kracauer drew attention to this emerging silent screen star whose Mongolian face told of the strange visions that haunted him. While the world would soon be impacted by Germany's own visions into World War, its art scene by 1913 had already undergone a turbulent shift. Theatre actors, who'd previously been somewhat sniffy about the movie industry, found themselves embracing the silver screen. Credit for this goes to Film Union head Paul Davidson, who set up a guild with Berlin theatre powerhouse Max Reinhardt to connect playwrights and filmmakers, thus fusing together the wary workers of both mediums. The timing of this revitalizing energy boost to its own talent was welcomed. German cinema had recently been dominated by imported escapist fare from the USA, such as the westerns of Tom Mix. The simple moral code and single-minded heroes of this uniquely American genre were immensely attractive to Germans in need of a clearly defined purpose they weren't getting in their own society. Ironically, when war broke out the year later, these American role models helped create the huge surge in voluntary military recruits in Germany. But before World War I could nurture its homegrown artists by advantageously shutting the borders to outside enemy influence, German studios needed to develop fantasies of their own on screen. Paul Wegener, one of Max Reinhardt's company of actors, was to become a major exponent of this, albeit flavored with a darker sensibility. The Student of Prague drew from the Gothic horrors of E.T.A. Hoffmann, Edgar Allan Poe's William Wilson, and the famous Faust legend of the consequences of bargaining with the devil. Wegener co-wrote the screenplay with Hans Heinz Evers, an author who shared his taste for sensation and imagination. There is a rather nice ornate device at the beginning introducing us to each of the principals, whereby a theatrical curtain is opened, revealing each actor in isolation, striking a characteristic pose, almost a reverse curtain call, including Wegener wielding a rapier and Grete Berger as the Countess reclining decorously on a chaise longue. Wegener is Baldwin, an impoverished student who is offered a peculiar deal by an enigmatic old gentleman, Scapinelli, John Gotthovd, whereby he agrees to sign a contract giving him 100,000 gold coins in return for whatever the old man chooses from his room. Baldwin readily agrees to this insanely easy bargain. What he cannot know is that it is a cunning trick by the devil. To his amazement, Scapinelli hijacks Baldwin's reflection from the mirror, stealing his soul in a sense. The doppelganger walks out with the gloating old man. Baldwin's confusion, though, is soon overtaken by his own pleasure at the money. Baldwin courts a beautiful countess, whilst his double haunts him. His twin makes his life a misery, going so far as to use his legendary swordsmanship to kill another man in a duel, a close relative of the countess, who the real Baldwin had sworn to leave alive. A card game with friends is taken over by the double, goading Baldwin to play against himself. Driven half mad, the student secretly climbs the gate into the Countess's grounds, taking a ladder up to her room, begging her forgiveness for what was done in his name and professing undying love for her. They kiss just as the reflection appears again, mocking him imperiously and frightening the Countess with this terrifying dual image. Baldwin flees, yet no matter where he runs to, his double follows. Wherever you go, I'll be. Finally, the strain is all too much, and the student dies, leaving the sorcerer Scapinelli to tear up the contract in macabre glee. The last shot is the doppelganger sitting on Baldwin's grave, staying at his last resting place. The Student of Prague is entertaining and spirited, whilst making picturesque use of its location work. The same week that The Magician was released in 1926, which I've covered in a previous episode, came a remake of The Student of Prague starring Conrad Veidt as perhaps a more convincingly youthful Baldwin, in what is widely regarded as the superior version, despite the poor quality of the only print I could find. By casting Veidt and Werner Krauss together as hoodwinked victim and respectively the mesmerizing sorcerer Scapinelli, writer-director Henrik the Golem Galeen was able to recapture something of the servant and master relationship dynamic they had in the cabinet of Dr. Caligari, though here we have the more personable side of Veidt to offset his disturbing mirror image. The 1926 remake features stronger character details, enabling you to care more about them, a vital ingredient if we are to be absorbed in the story. Also, this version made Baldwin's battle with his mirror self an overt duel between two sides of his inner nature, a Jekyll struggling for supremacy over a Hyde existing as a tangible opponent face to face with him. The introduction establishes up front that this will be a tragedy by beginning on the student's tombstone, which reads, "Here lies Baldwin. He fought with the devil and lost." We see more of Baldwin's prowess as the greatest of swordsmen in the opening, when he takes on all comers in the tavern in swashbuckling style. This bravado also contrasts well with the crushing weight of his impending doom upon him once his contract with Scapinelli materializes his murderous double. We are also led to care more about the flower seller and her unrequited love for Baldwin that causes her to betray him. There is a powerful sequence during a fox hunt showing Scapinelli's long-range influence conducting the flow of horses and dogs like an occult puppeteer, leading Baldwin to save Countess Margit when she falls from her horse. Also, when his second self commits the murder of his dueling partner that the real Baldwin swore not to do, instead of the 1913 Wegener double's matter-of-fact reaction, here Veidt's doppelganger takes a moment to gravely register the committed murder. Ultimately, Baldwin faces off against his mirror image in the very mirror from which he was extracted. He shoots the glass in his frenzied state, and as he studies his reflection in the shard, his spirit seems to splinter too, and he dies, leaving us a closing shot that returns to his tombstone where we began. Fans of silent horror films may prefer this version to the 1913 original and appreciate how its performance style fits neatly into the expressionist era. Baldwin's supernatural inner turmoil spoke profoundly to German audiences' own conflicted psychology and helped it become a successful release. And 10 years later, in 1936, the story was still considered potent enough to prompt a second remake. Thanks for listening. If you like what you hear, please don't forget to hit subscribe.